Good evening, YouTube. So tonight I'm presenting a sculpture that's quite special to me in the sense that it initiated many larger sculptures after it. I experimented with smaller pieces initially, uh, anywhere from 1.5 inches to 2 or 3 inches tall. Very small Kiro pieces, in casting them in solid pewter. And then I stepped it up to this piece and figured, why not? And just to see what a medium-sized piece would turn out to be. And so this was cast in one pour. It's called the Seed Totem. And here it is. So this piece is about 13, 14 inches tall and 6 inches at the base. Initially, I started with a styrofoam conical shape, and then I began adding individual sunflower seeds, real sunflower seeds. And then once that was done, I did a spray lacquer to seal the seeds so that then the mold release that I put on it would help the silicone not stick to the seeds. Now, the wax that I use, the brown microcrystalline wax, it unto itself does not need a mold release because it's wax, and silicone will not stick to wax. So I did a silicone mold, not the same kind of silicone that you hear normally around the sculpture world. And I'll get into that process a bit later in the channel's evolution. So again, this was one pour. The piece is hollow, but it's quite thick. I'm kind of dialing that in, but at the same time, I'm playing it safe. This piece is not that complex, so it was quite an easy situation. You'll see much more complex pieces coming where pouring it a little thicker just guarantees that everything turns out in a kind of a solid state way. This piece doesn't really have much of a story behind it. It was just more of a intuition that I had a sense of what I wanted, or kind of a vague hint, I guess you could say. I don't sketch or draw inspiration from anything external. All my pieces are pretty much stream of consciousness, just sitting down and I start to sculpt, or I see an interesting shape and then I start working with it. So once this piece turned out, there were no air bubbles to speak of, except 3 or 4 of the sunflower seeds at the very bottom didn't turn out exact, and I think that was due to how I was pouring the piece more than anything. And so I went back in and hand soldered and restored those. But ultimately, a piece like this with hundreds and hundreds of tiny sunflower seeds, including the detail and etc., unheard of in the bronze industry. Pewter is not as buoyant as bronze at its melting temperature. So bronze is around 1900 to 2100, and pewter is at 400 degrees. You can melt pewter on a cook stove. Not that I'm saying to do that. I'm just saying that you can melt it on just a regular propane burner, like a crab boil burner outside. And I'll get into the process. I'll be doing some instructional videos around pewter casting. And another advantage, and I'll do a bronze versus, or pewter versus bronze video. Bronze is a very ancient casting metal, going all the way back to Africa, and of course Greece and the Romans. So bronze is very volatile, and of course all molten metal is dangerous. But of course, the higher the temperature, the more dangerous it is. And I would say that pewter is the least dangerous of all casting metals. Of course, you want to, I'm saying of course a lot tonight for some reason, you want to wear full face shield, gloves. They don't have to be huge, heavy-duty gloves like you would use in like glass casting. Deerskin gloves are fine up until you start handling the cast iron pots that you melt the pewter in. Then you want the thicker gloves, like 1/4 inch thick gloves. So you normally have 2 sets of gloves at the pour site. This piece has been archivally sealed. So the patina is India ink that I heat the piece up to make sure there's no moisture in it, and then brush on the India ink so the piece is completely black. And then I go back and wipe it back with steel wool, like quadruple aught steel wool. And then sometimes I polish pieces a little bit to get a finer mirror finish. You can also do that with buffing because the metal is soft. You can't really buff bronze, but pewter you can. You just have to put some elbow grease into it. And but the trick to it is to get it as fine as you can get it before you go trying to buff it. And then it's archivally sealed, so no more oxidation or anything like that, as long as it stays interior. I mean, this could be on a patio, like a covered patio, but definitely not meant to be put out into a public park or a garden or something like this. It could be if it were sealed with maybe something more industrial, like bronze statues are sealed with an industrial sealant. But even them, they have to be resealed depending on the quality of the weather that they're in, decade by decade. Those seals don't last indefinitely. So it's standing on a crescent-moon-base, and it's juxtapositioned a bit to the left. And as you can see, it's an elongated skull, so it's got a little bit of a skull alien vibe and a Mayan Aztec ish headdress. Sometimes pieces simply just are like titles, and there's no, all the pages are blank. So it's left up to the viewer to feel it out and write the script, so to speak. I think that's the strength of totemic artwork, that it really speaks to the individual at the baseline, and there's not a whole lot of room for ego in a certain kind of, if you stay in a certain format with simplicity and symbolism, you're working within not necessarily the constraints, but the rules of the symbols, versus something more narrative where you're putting your ideas and decisions into the piece, or your story, or some sort of self-portrait or narrative that is autobiographical in some way, or referencing a historical event, commemorating something. This piece is available straight from the studio. I'm doing a fundraiser, and that's ongoing. That's going to be until I figure out a homestead of my own. I have a lot of artwork, and I've had a bit of touch and go, finding my niche and the right gallery. I've had pieces in Houston and Laguna, California, and Carmel, California, but not a large collection of pieces, which changed 2 or 3 years ago. I started building up enough pieces to have a gallery show, and then October 7th rolled around, and my ideology around life and the status quo changed dramatically. And so right now I'm mainly focused on building an online clientele and audience, and I'm looking forward to meeting private art admirers and collectors, and just people who love art, who are interested in bringing it into their quality of life, and who resonate with my work. I would like for this to be my main passion and not necessarily career. I've been an artist all my life, so it's more of it's just what I do. But I would like to turn this into something that I could call my own as far as finances are concerned, and something that could sustain the studio and help it grow and branch out, because I've got close to 200 molds, and having to do other things outside of the studio to get along, pay my bills and things. There's only but so much time, and so I'm pushing these channels on YouTube. I have 2 channels. One is a political analysis channel, and, the other one is art only channel. And the political analysis channel um, is also psychological, self-help, um, more around mental health and observations of society and behavior and um, psychoanalysis, a little bit of profiling. Uh, so this is the seed totem. And another thing about pewter versus bronze, pewter is 2,000 years old plus, as far as being used to cast things. It's very seldom, you very seldom see it in the fine art world. And I hope to change that, because there's a lot of advantages to pewter that bronze simply does not have. And I like the black and white photography reference that it has, the silver, like the silver tone, black and white photographic aesthetic. It has an aura, so to speak, all of its own. And a big advantage to pewter is there is no shrinkage in scale. So I cast directly into the mother mold of the original piece. There's no lost wax. So to scale, this is 1-to-1 to the original, whereas bronze, you get about 10 to 13% shrinkage, which is pretty considerable if you think about just the feel of the piece. And every bronze in the world is smaller than its original, because that's just the nature of the process of getting a bronze replica of the original. And no air bubbles. That's another big one. Again, it's pewter. One of its main objectives when it's poured into the mold is to fill every possible void without hindrance. And its molecules are closer together. It's not as buoyant as bronze. Bronze is very viscous and dynamic when it's molten, whereas and let's say it's more buoyant, so air bubbles tend to trap easier, and it's not when it pushes into the mold, it's like water sloshing around. It's very, very fluid. And pewter melting at 400 degrees, the molecules are much closer together. So when it goes into the mold, it's more like heavy cream, or heavy cream with a little bit of water added to it. Not milk, but also not heavy cream. So when it goes in, it's already on its way to solidifying. And when it goes into the mold, within 5 minutes or less, sometimes it's already solid. So it happens it starts to set up within 10 to 20 seconds in some places, like on the surface, the first eighth of an inch, because as soon as it hits the surface, that is, of course, not the same temperature, it starts to solidify almost immediately. So it's a very, very different creature than bronze, moving around inside of a hot ceramic shell, sometimes glowing red hot. So there's that. And I have a lot more to say about pewter, but as far as a my main aim with it is to get the sculpture. I'm not necessarily attached to it being bronze. I simply want the sculpture in metal, not wax. And pewter has proven itself in spades to achieve that. So I'm very happy with it. And it also means I can pour my own pieces. And this is one of one. I only make one edition of pretty much, I would say, 99% of my sculptures. Smaller pieces, sometimes I cast more than one. But as a general rule, even with the smaller pieces, they're one of one. So I think that's it for this piece. Thank you for listening, and like and subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for spending some time with the seed totem and myself. There's some links down in the description to my webpage, Instagram account. Feel free to reach out. Thank you and good night.